reduced performance for this year, last year, 2023, to 3.3%. Expected to slightly increase this year to 3.8 and next year to 4.1. So more or less the same conditions driving the economic performance of Sub-Saharan Africa is linked to the global economic conditions. The other point we track is the prices across the world, because that really directly affects our mandate as a monetary authority. For the global commodity prices, we saw this reducing for last year, almost throughout last year. Slight increase in third quarter of last year when you look at the global energy index. But overall, when I look at the overall reduction in the energy index, I think, let's see if I have the table here. Yes, the energy index overall for last year, 2023, is reducing by 30 by 30%. So that's you see that in our numbers, in our inflation numbers. Same with the non-energy index. So we see all commodity prices really reducing throughout the year last year, though there was slight increase in third quarter, but overall there was general reduction in the commodity prices, and this is expected to continue this year. As you see, for global energy index, expected to reduce by 4.5%, and then the non-energy index reduce by 3.1%. And this has an overall impact on the global inflation. Next slide, please. So the global inflation is reducing to 5.8% this year, from 6.8% in 2023, and we had 8.7%, if you remember, in 2022. So it has been going down, and it's expected to continue this downward trend even past beyond this year. Sub-Saharan Africa registering the same downward trend, though slightly still higher than the global average, so reducing from 15.8% last year, 2023, to 13.1% this year. So that is the summary of the global economic performance that really are linked or impact on what we see on the domestic front. So looking at the domestic economy, the real economic performance remains strong. As you saw in the numbers published by the Institute of Statistics, the first 3 quarters of last year, we registered stronger growth than was projected. Overall average of 7.6% for the first 3 quarters. And when we look at the composite index of economic activities, these are frequent economic numbers we track here at the central bank. We see the fourth quarter remaining strong as well. So the composite index of economic activities increased by 7.2% in the fourth quarter. And as you see that graph, normally our composite index of economic activities is always in the same direction as the overall real GDP performance at the end of the day. And so with this, we expect to see 2023 performance higher than the 6.2% that was originally projected, based on the numbers we already have for first 3 quarters, but also the composite index of economic activities we saw in the fourth quarter of last year. Looking at the external sector, continues to be a bit weak, with the exports growing overall for 2023 by just 1.7%, and bigger increase imports by 6.8%. And when you look at the fourth quarter that maybe this monetary policy committee focused on, there was a bigger reduction in merchandise exports by 8.7%. Similar reduction in imports, but much smaller than what we experienced in exports. And this was mainly caused by reduced commodity prices of our primary exports, mainly minerals and agricultural products, but also impacted on the volumes of our coffee and tea exports, were impacted by the unfavorable weather conditions we had over the last 2 years. So all that together affected our export performance last year. And because of this low performance of our exports, we saw the trade deficit widening by 10%. So that's really a summary of the external sector, but we see good performance in service exports, that's tourism receipts, good exports in, good performance in remittances, so that helped to cover the gap we see here. But also because of this and because of the tightening US dollar, because of the tight monetary condition they have back home, that has had an impact on the depreciation of our currency. As you saw again in our reports, last year we had maybe the highest depreciation we've had for quite some time now, at 18.05% last year. Coming on interest development, which is our main focus as a monetary authority when we take policy decisions, here we expect to impact the interest rates. When you look at the short-term market rates, the interbank rate increased from 6.8% in Q4 of 2022 to 8.25% fourth quarter of last year. This was in line with the increased monetary policy stance that we kept on increasing over the last 2 years. Though the lending rate remained really, in fact, slightly reducing from 6.5 to 15.78, this was mainly driven by the mixture of the loans that were given last year. We see short-term big loans dominating the lending of last year, and normally these are able to attract low interest rates. So that's the main driver of the reduction we see in the lending interest rates. Otherwise, the short-term money market rates, the T-bill rates, the government bond rates, the deposit rates, all these increase in line with the monetary policy direction we are giving throughout the last 2 years. And when we look at inflation developments, now coming to our own inflation, as I said, we can link this to what we saw on the global side. So we saw, as we had projected and as we had communicated to you throughout last year, we expected inflation to continue reducing and be within single digits by the end of the year. So as you see, the fourth quarter we registered 8.9% inflation. In fact, for December, as you see on the slides, on the next slide, for December and January, inflation has gone back into our band. So this can be linked to three main factors. So one was of course, the decision taken by the central bank as we continued tightening our monetary policy. We wanted to impact on this inflation. But the government also took different decisions. One is on the subsidies on public transport, subsidy on fuel, subsidy on fertilizers, and removed taxes on some of the foodstuff last year, plus a lot of efforts in mobilizing farmers for season A last year. All these have had a positive impact on the reduction of prices. Also, the reduced global commodity prices that we've already shown in the first slides had impact on our core inflation, with a lot of imported food and other commodities reducing. Plus also, as you see, the energy inflation, it has really remained below 5% for. This could be linked to the reduced oil prices globally, but also good conditions last year for the solid fuels within the country itself. So as I was saying, this is the graph that shows inflation developments peaking at 21.7 in November 2022 and continued going down to 5% last month. So this, again, as I said, it was in our projections, and as we had communicated before, So you see a lot of commodities, especially agricultural commodities, fresh food commodities have really gone down. These are numbers we are showing. The 5% is inflation, reduced inflation, but for most of the agricultural commodities, we've seen reduced prices. That is negative inflation in most of the commodities. And with this, we expect overall inflation this year to remain within our band, and in fact averaging around 5% for this year, 2024. However, despite these projections of low inflation, let me say, within our band, there are some associated risks of the geopolitical tensions we continue to see in the Middle East. War in Ukraine is not yet over, and so other challenges related to weather conditions. Today, we are doing well with agriculture, and we expect season B to be good as well. So the numbers we show there, 5% projection, we expect normal agricultural performance throughout the year. So it's only these two risks that are mainly could affect these projections we are giving here. And because of all this information, we decided to maintain the central bank rate at 7.5%. And we expect, if the projections we have as indicated of 5% throughout the year, we might start reducing the policy rate in the next MPC rounds, depending on how these economic variables behave going forward. So far what we project is positive, and if it continues like this, then we might start reducing the policy rate. But for now, to stabilize the prices, to be sure that we're on the right track, the Monetary Policy Committee decided to maintain the policy rate at 7.5%. So that's a summary of the outcome of the Monetary Policy Committee deliberations and decisions. On the Financial Stability Committee, we continue to see strong performance of our financial sector in general, overall across all the subsectors of the financial sector, be it banking, microfinance, insurance, pension, payment system. They all remain strong, as we see in the numbers in the different slides. But here is a combined picture of the overall financial sector, showing assets growing by 20%, mainly linked to the good economic condition that we saw, good performance of the economy in general. But we also saw increases in deposits and efficiency in the performance of the financial institutions in general. As you see on the other side, so this performance also indicates how the financial sector continues to contribute to overall economic performance and resilience. With the back to the other side, please. Yeah. So as you can see, the financial sector assets have increased as a percentage of GDP, have increased to 66.7% from 64.9% last year. So this is a good development that shows more deepening of the financial sector and better impact or contribution of the financial sector to the overall performance of the economy. Here we focus on the banking sector, showing the increased lending to the private sector, with the outstanding loans increasing by 19.2%, and new authorized loans increasing by 38.7%. This shows more appetite by the banks to lend, but also more demand of loans from the private sector, from the economic actors in general. And it's also linked to reduced credit risk, as you see in the numbers in the next slides. So there are better quality of the loans that banks are giving, and as they improve their underwriting practices, they are able to give more loans. And so this is positive to the overall economic performance, but also the performance of the banking industry in particular. This slide shows the prudential numbers that we track, which shows the stability of the banking industry. So the capital remains strong. So this is a measure of how the banks are positioned to deal with any adverse shocks that might affect their performance. And as you can see, it remains really strong above. Normally, we don't expect any, what we call the capital adequacy ratio, which is a measure of how strong the capital of any given institution is. And at 23.2%, we're above the 15% minimum required. As I said, the quality of the loans have really improved and remains below the 5% benchmark that we've given ourselves, and so this shows good performance of good quality and efficiency of the banks in approving and administering their loans. The liquidity ratios that we show there is also remain strong, and then the profitability continues to improve and remain strong. And again, as I always say, the most important thing is that most of these profits are plowed back into the business of the banks through retained earnings. We see the same story with microfinance institutions: strong capital base, good liquidity numbers, improved non-performing loans, improved quality of their loans, and continued improvement in their profitability, which is more or less the same message as we saw from the banking sector side. The insurance sector, here we focus on the private insurance, which had issues for quite some time. But as you see in this first graph, for the first time in more than 8 years, we are having underwriting profit from the insurance sector. So there are reforms that have been going on since 2018, reforms in their operations, reforms in their pricing and understanding of the risks they are undertaking, reforms in managing risks, and all this has contributed to improvement in the performance of the insurance sector. And so this really shows us that now they are stable and can continue to grow and have the capacity to bring on board other products. So this is the measure of the stability of the insurance sector. Solvency ratio, which is a measure of their capital base, remains very strong. Their liquidity, which had been below our benchmark of 100%, has now moved to above 100% and remains strong. Profitability has also continued to improve, and we are happy with what we see in the insurance sector now based on what we had in the past years. Pension, I won't say much here. I just say that we continue to see improved assets of the public pension with increased contributions and increased investment income that continues to grow the assets of RSSB, the pension fund. So on the payment services, I think again what we see is more deepening of digital financial services. As you see, as a percentage of GDP, which is maybe the easiest measure we use to see how deep the digital financial services are. So we improved from 147%, the value of digital financial services as a percentage of GDP, increasing from 147 to 200% last year, by end of last year. If you remember, I think just 3 years ago, before COVID, we were below 50% for this measure. So we saw a big change from COVID. And the other point here I can stress is on the person-to-business transactions. In 2021, when the service providers reintroduced the service charge, we had seen the use of mobile POSs really stalled. But from mobilizations we had from 2022, we saw this increasing again. So we see more transactions on using the mobile or the merchant codes, which is something that is good and is re-digitizing our financial transactions. So this is what I was saying. When you look at the active merchants, 2020 we had around 50, almost around 60. Then when the charges were introduced, reduced to about 50,000. Now this has really exponentially increased to more than 350,000 active merchants using the mobile POSs. And again, it's indicated in the value of the payments and the transactions. This has also greatly increased. So as an outlook, we see and expect the financial sector to remain stable and resilient despite the global challenges we see around us. We've really seen this state of affairs constant since COVID. We are worried of how that would affect our financial sector, but has remained strong and sound, and we expect to see this continuing. And of course, we will remain vigilant as regulators to continue overseeing what is happening in the financial sector. There are different risks, the climate risk and other risks, and so we continue working with the financial sector to ensure that the sector is really remains strong and adequate to withstand any shocks and continue serving their clients and serving the economy in general. So briefly, that's a summary of the outcome of the meetings of the two policy committees. I'll be happy to welcome questions from the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. For the sake of our local media houses, we would request for a brief in Kinyarwanda.
Okay. Reka dukomeze kuri slides wenda mu ncamake nareba izo nagerageza gukoresha. So mu magambo make twashimira abanyamakuru ko mwitabira ubutumire bwacu kuza mu kiganiro mbwirwaruhame gitanga ibyavuye mu nama za komite ebyiri za Banki y'Igihugu. Hari komite ishinzwe politiki y'ifaranga, hari na komite ishinzwe kutajagajega ku rwego rw'imari. Mpereye kuri komite ishinzwe politiki y'ifaranga, duhereye ku rwego mpuzamahanga tubona ubukungu ku rwego mpuzamahanga bwaragenze buhoro guhera mu mwaka ushize, ugereranyije uko byari bimeze 2021-2022 harimo kuzahuka bwo kuva mu bibazo twatewe na COVID. Ariko kubera ibibazo by'ubuhahirane byari biriho guhera mu mwaka ushize n'umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko waragiye hejuru cyane, ndetse kubera ibyo ngibyo bituma amabanki ku rwego mpuzamahanga, amabanki y'ibihugu afata ibyemezo byo kuzamura urwunguko kuri politiki yabo, bituma amafaranga akoreshwa ahenda, byatumye aho kugenda buhoro ku bukungu ku rwego mpuzamahanga. Ariko icyiza nuko ibyifuzwaga ari ugusubiza ibiciro, umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku rwego mpuzamahanga hasi. Uko tubibona mu mibare, ibiciro by'ibicuruzwa cyane cyane bikomoka kuri petroli, ibihingwa n'ibindi byose umwaka ushize byaragabanutse cyane, bituma muri rusange impuzandego y'umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko ku rwego mpuzamahanga igabanuka ijya kuri 6.8% mu mwaka wa 2023, ivuye ku 8.7% mu 2022, kandi biteganyijwe ko uzakomeza kumanuka kugera kuri 5.8%. Ibi rero bifite icyo bivuze ku bukungu bw'igihugu cyacu n'umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko. Mpereye ku bukungu bw'igihugu cyacu, muri rusange tubona ubukungu bukomeje kwitwara neza mu mwaka ushize. Mu bihembo bya mbere bitatu mpuzandengo yari ku muvuduko w'ubukungu bwari kuri 7.6%. Iyo turebye imibare dukurikiranira hafi nka Banki Nkuru y'Igihugu, muri gihembwe cya kane cy'umwaka ushize nabwo tubona ubukungu bwarakomeje kuzamuka neza. So tukaba tubona igipimo cyari cyatanzwe mu mwaka ushize yuko ubukungu buzazamuka 6.2%, tuzakirenga ndetse bishobora no kurengwa 7%. Iyo mibare nyirizina izatangwa n'ikigo kibarusha mibare mu kwezi kwa gatatu nibwo tubona imibare y'umwaka ushize. Ariko muri rusange navuga yuko ubukungu buhagaze neza, bwagenze neza muri 2023. Nubwo igice kimwe kigendanye n'ubuhahirane n'amahanga, ibintu twohereza amahanga, iyo urebye mu mwaka wose byazamutseho 1.7% gusa, kandi byo tumiza byazamutseho 6.8%. iyo byatumye icyuho hagati y'ibyo dutumiza n'ibyo twohereza kizamukaho 10%, bikaba byaragize ingaruka ku isoko ry'ivunjisha hano mu gihugu. Iki cyuho cyazamutse ugihuje no kuba idolari rya Amerika ryarakomeje gutumbagira ku mafaranga mpuzamahanga yose, niyo byatumye ifaranga ryacu rita agaciro 18.05% mu mwaka ushize. Ariko tukabona bisa naho bigenda birushaho kumera neza muri uyu mwaka twatangira 2024. Ikindi navuga ni kuri za interest rates uko abantu inyungu zakwa n'amabanki ntabwo zazamutse nubwo twari twazamuye urwunguko nka banki y'igihugu, cyane kubera ubwo ni ku mpuzandengo, kubera yuko umwaka ushize amabanki yatanze imyenda minini itangwa kenshi ku rwunguko rwo hasi, so ugeranyijeho ku rwego ku mpuzandengo muri rusange ntabwo byazamutse cyane. Ikindi ukurikirana cyane ku muvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko, nk'uko twari twabivuze mu bihembwe bishize, twari twiteze yuko umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko uzakomeza kujya hasi ndetse ukagera mu gipimo twifuza mu mpera z'umwaka no muri uyu mwaka turimo 2024. Jya kuri slide ikurikiraho. So iyo urebye rero mu kwezi kwa 12 kuri mwaka ushize, umuvuduko w'ibiciro ku masoko wari wageze kuri 6.4%, ari mu gipimo twifuza hagati ndetse mu kwezi kwa mbere kuri mwaka bigera kuri 5%. Ibi ahenshi bihuzwa nuko ibiciro by'ibiribwa cyane byaramanutse cyane, kubera ko twagize umusaruro mwiza mu mwaka ushize. Leta yashyize imbaraga cyane mu gukora n'abahinzi mu gihugu hose kongera umusaruro, tugira n'amahirwe ikirere nacyo kiraduhira. Ibyo byatumye tugira umusaruro ushimishije hafi ku biribwa byose. Ibiciro byaramanutse ugereranyije uko byari bimeze mu mwaka ushize, byatumye iyi inflation muri rusange itangira kumanuka. Iyo turebye uyu mwaka twiteze yuko n'ubundi ubuhinzi mu gihembwe cya kabiri nabwo buzagenda neza, bigatuma tubona yuko umuvuduko ku biciro by'amasoko uzaba uri hafi 5% muri uyu mwaka wa 2024. Kubera iyo mpamvu rero iyo turebye iki gipimo tubona mu 2024, hashobora kuba haracyari ibibazo ku rwego mpuzamahanga by'intambara ziri muri ariya Ukraine, intambara iri hagati ya Israel na Palestine, n'ibibazo bishamikiye bijya mu nyanja itukura, ndetse no kuba hashobora kongera ko ibibazo ku bihindagurika kw'ikirere. Byabaye ngombwa ko tuba tugumisha urwunguko rwa banki y'igihugu kuri 7.5% kugira ngo tubanze twizere ko kugabanuka k'umuvuduko w'ibiciro tubona kuzakomeza ko tubyifuza, tukagera kuri 5% muri uyu mwaka wa 2024. Uko tubibona nibikomeza kugenda uko tubibona imbere mu bihembwe biri imbere, dushobora gutangira kugabanya urwunguko rwa banki y'igihugu bitewe n'uko tubona inflation zameze mu bihembwe biri imbere. Iyo niyo ncamake byavuye mu kanama ka politiki y'ifaranga ku rwego tutajegajega ku rwego rw'imari. Ibyo mbivuze mu ncamake nuko urwego rw'imari rakomeza gutera imbere neza, ari amabanki, ari insurance, ari ibigo by'imari iciriritse, byose byakomeje gutera imbere. Amafaranga biguriza abigana, ari umutungo wabo muri rusange, byose byarazamutse. Ikindi gishimishije nuko ubwiza bw'inguzanyo zitangwa bwakomeje kumera neza, inguzanyo zishyurwa neza zakomeje kuba munsi ya 5%, ari ku mabanki, ari no kuri za microfinance. Ikindi ku bigo by'ubwishingizi nabyo byakomeje kurushaho kunoza imikorere yabo. Nibwo bwa mbere tubonye babona inyungu mu bucuruzi bwabo bwite bwo gucuruza insurance. Bishimishije, bigaragaza ko urwego rumaze kunoza imikorere yarwo. Twitegura yuko ruzakomeza gutera imbere neza, rugafasha iterambere ry'ubukungu muri rusange. So iyo turebye rero nta mpungenge dufite kutajegajega ku rwego rw'imari muri rusange, kandi nka banki y'igihugu ishinzwe kugenzura tuzakomeza gukurikirana imikorere yabo kureba yuko nta cyahungabanya ibigo by'imari mu gihugu cyacu. Murakoze cyane.
Murakoze, Governor. We are now opening up for questions from the media, and we are going to request you to limit your questions to only 2 so that you can allow your colleagues to also ask. Bloomberg.
Hi, Ondira from Bloomberg. I have two questions. Earlier on, you had mentioned that the government had run a couple of subsidy programs due to helping manage inflation. I'm just keen on, first of all, how much longer will these government subsidies continue? And now that fuel prices are easing and harvests have been good, and how much has gone into it so far?
Yes, so thank you. The subsidies, maybe the main objective wasn't really to deal with inflation as such, but maybe to ease the impact of the rising prices on the population, mainly the lower pyramid of our population. When you look at the public service transport fare, that was mainly to support the underprivileged. So, but in a way, of course, it had a positive impact on the inflation, limiting the impact on inflation. So yes, as prices are normalizing, the subsidies are being reduced. At least I'm aware that the subsidy on fuel has been removed 100%. So government is looking at ways of how they'll start reducing the subsidy on public transport. We don't have the actual plan of how that is going to be done, but we know that will start to be done as well. I think on the fertilizers, I don't know if Chief Economist, you have any details on the fertilizers, but I think that has also slightly reduced. We don't have the total numbers here of what was spent on the subsidy. I think that can be received from the Ministry of Finance. But what was important was the objective of reducing the impact of the rising prices on the lives of the population, and so that has really helped to weather through the difficult times, and now gradually is being removed. Thank you.
Let's take RBA.
Akoze cyane nyakubahwa Gavana, nitwa Jean Claude Mutuyezu, ndi umunyamakuru wa RBA. Twagira ngo mugire icyo mutubwira kuba ifaranga ry'u Rwanda ririmo kugenda rikomeza guta agaciro ugereranyije n'amanyamahanga, bigeze hafi ku 300. Nta cyo bishobora kugiraho nk'ingaruka se cyangwa nta cyo bishobora kubangamira, cyane cyane no ku muvuduko w'ibiciro, kuko nuko twabonye biri kumanuka, se nta cyo bishobora guhinduraho. Nakoze.
Yes, nibyo iyo ifaranga rikomeje guta agaciro bigira ingaruka ku biciro ku bwabyo, ariko iyo uriya mubare twatanze wa inflation izaba iri kuri hafi 5% muri uyu mwaka, ubwo twashyizemo ibishobora guterwa nuko kuba ifaranga ryataye agaciro mu mwaka ushize. So ntabwo tubona ko bizaba ari binini cyane, ariko birimo. So ni ukuvuga ngo kuko mwabonye muri risk ubwo nabyita ngo mu Kinyarwanda ibidasanzwe bishobora kubaho muri uyu mwaka, biriya turabizi byarabaye, so twabishyize mu mibare yacu, birimo muri iriya 5%. So ntacyo tubona bizahindura kinini ugereranyije uko imibare imeze uyu munsi.
Ubushize mwavugaga ko hari amadolari ashyirwa ku isoko buri kwezi, ubwo bigeze he?
Nibyo tubikora buri cyumweru, ntabwo buri kwezi. Hari aho byabaye ngombwa turazamura tugeza ku miliyoni 10 ku cyumweru, ubu twarongeye dusubira kuri miliyoni 5 ku cyumweru ko twabonaga isoko ritangiye kumera neza.
Alice.
Thank you. My name is Alice from the New Times. I have two questions. In January, Governor, you warned us of the effect of the disruption of Red Sea on inflation around the economy. But we've continued to see the slowdown in inflation in the domestic economy. Does that mean that there is no impact so far coming from that disruption? And my second question is that as much as we know that it takes time for the key operator to transit or affect the commercial interest rates. But does that mean that ever since we've increased the policy rate, there haven't been any increase from any certain bank on their lending rate, much as we see the uptake of loans from people? Thank you.
Okay, I can respond to the second question. I will request the Chief Economist to respond to the first question. Yes, as expected, normally as the central bank rate is being increased, we expect the lending rates from banks to also increase. But this has happened over a period of less than 2 years. And as I said earlier, we saw a lot of efficiencies within the operations of the banking industry. And because of that, their profitability has remained positive, has been increasing. So due to the operation efficiencies and gains, and because this inflation and increase of policy rates would be short-term, let me say 2 years, maybe the banks are not yet seen the need to increase their lending rates. If it was to be sustained for quite some time, then it would impact on their cost of financing. As you saw in the presentation, the deposit rates has started increasing, so their cost of financing is being affected, though they have a big chunk of the deposit interest-free. They are demanded deposits, so there is no cost related to this. And that could also explain why they didn't have big pressure to increase their lending rates, because the cost of financing didn't really change much within this last 2 years. So that's what we see, that we are looking at really the operational efficiencies, profitability continues to improve, the quality of their loans remain good, so it would then expect that to happen if this was persistent for more than 2 years. So as we said, the projections we see, we expect to see normalization from this year going forward. Chief.
Thank you for the question. Maybe to start on the Red Sea issues that you asked. The problem here is twofold. We have a delay in transport of goods from those who are supposed to pass normally by the Red Sea that are now transiting all the way through Cape Town. That can cause delay and also increase in transport cost. So we are aware of that. Some international, it has affected the international trade and prices as of January and beginning February. Now, to answer your question, it will depend on how long that will persist. So far in the January numbers, we've not noticed a big impact. But if this continues, it might affect inflation. This is why we are posing it and explaining it as a risk. It depends on how long this continues. As Governor explained, the reduction in inflation in December and January is mainly driven by lower prices for fresh food, thanks to a good harvest here in Rwanda. So that is the main reason why overall inflation is down. So the Red Sea, what will happen on the Red Sea in the coming months will influence international prices, and therefore we will see if there will be an impact on domestic inflation. So far, it is considered as a risk.
Assumpta, VOA.
Murakoze, nitwa Assumpta Kaboyi, nkorera Ijwi ry'Amerika. Nari mfite ikibazo, hari icyo mwavuze ko ubukungu butakomeje kugenda neza kubera intambara za Ukraine na Rusiya ndetse na Israel. Nibazaga ngo intambara zo muri kano karere ko intambara yo muri Congo, gufunga umupaka ku Burundi, ntacyo byahungabanije ku bukungu mu gihugu cyacu. Murakoze.
Yes, iyo turebye no mu gihe twabetse yuko habaye kugabanuka gake kwa cyo twita re-exports, ibintu dutumiza amahanga bikongera koherezwa mu karere, cyane cyane ibikomoka kuri petrol. Ariko muri iki gihembwe gishize byarongeye birazamuka. So mu by'ukuri nta uretse nka Burundi yafunze burundu, ariko iyo turebye ubwinshi bw'ibyajyagayo ni bike cyane. So kuri Congo ntacyo turabona kigaragara ko cyagize ingaruka ku buhahirane cyane cyane hagati yacu nabo. So kugeza ubu mu bare dufite nta kibazo tubona kidasanzwe.
Radio 10.
Murakoze Governor, nitwa David Nzabonimpa nkorera Radio 10 na TV 10. Ikibazo mfite ni kuri inflation. Umuvuduko w'izamuka ry'ibiciro waragabanutse ushingiye ku mibare, ariko ingamba ziracyari za zindi Governor, haracyari 7.5 ya Central Bank rate. Nyakibaza ngo ku imibare igaragaza ko cya kintu mwahanganaga nacyo cyaciye bugufi, kuki mwebwe mutoroheje iriya ngoyi ku buryo bigaragara ko bitanga icyizere koko. Ikindi mugenzi wanjye yakibajije, ariko ndagira ngo mudufashe wenda n'abumva Ikinyarwanda nabo babyumve neza. Guverinoma iherutse gufata icyemezo cyo gukuraho nkunganire kuri transport, kandi biragaragara ko inflation ku bikomoka kuri petrol iracyari hejuru, nubwo igenda igabanuka, ariko munagaragaza ko hari impungenge z'ibibazo bya politike zo mu karere no hakurya y'u Rwanda. Nta ngaruka bishobora kugira n'ubundi bigaca intege cya cyerekezo muvuga ko uyu mwaka ushobora gusiga izamuka ry'ibiciro ku isoko, umuvuduko wagiye kuri 5 cyangwa munsi yaho? Ikindi ndibaza ni ku kintu kiri kuvugwa hanze aha ngaha kinamaze n'iminsi, hari amabanki ari kugenda agura andi, umubare wayo uragabanuka. Nta mpungenge biteye kuko mugaragaza ko assets zabo zizamuka ariko banki zikagabanuka, abantu murabasaba kugira kubitsa mu mabanki, ariko ibi bintu byo kwihuza imwe ikagura indi, hari n'abavuga ngo ni inyamahanga ziri kugura inyarwanda, nabyo bikaba ikindi kibazo. Ariko reka njye mperaho ngaho ko ziri kuba nkeya, ntabwo shobora gutuma haza capitalism mu mabanki, ariko bigira ingaruka ku baturage, ari nabyo bishobora kugabanya umubare w'abakoresha banki. Murakoze.
Urakoze. Reka nzi gusaba Dr. Governor asubiza icyo ngicyo cyo guhuza kw'amabanki nicyo bivuze kuri serivisi ziha abazigana. Icya mbere kuri ko ibintu bimeze neza, kuki twagumishaho kandi n'ibice 5%. Ngira ngo nabisobanuye mu kiganiro natanze, nuko nubwo byageze aho twifuza, ariko n'amezi 2 gusa tumaze turi muri iki gipimo cyacu twifuza. Ikindi icyerekezo tubona biraguma mu gipimo twifuza, ariko twagaragaje impungenge zihari zishobora gutuma biva muri cya gipimo twifuza ko twaguma mu cya 5%, hagati y'8 na 2. Kuba rero ikinavuze yuko bikomeje ukunguku mu bihembwe biri imbere, dushobora gutangira kumanura urwunguko rwa banki y'igihugu. Urumva iyi niyo monetary policy ya mbere tugize kuva inflation isubiye muri band. Twaba twihuse cyane tugiye gufata ibyemezo bihita bimanura policy rate, tutaragira stability, kwizera yuko ibyo tubona imibare twereka kuko ari byo bizakomeza. So ariyo mpamvu twavuze ngo reka tube prudent ubwo mu Kinyarwanda na ubushishozi kwirinda kwihuta, kugira ngo tubanze turebe yuko koko iyi mibare dufite uko tubibona ariko bizagenda, tubone gutangira gusubiza hasi urwunguko. Ikindi nuko imibare y'ubukungu uko biri imeze neza. Ikindi nk'uko twabivuze, ntabwo banki zihutije kuzamura urwunguko ziheraho abantu amafaranga. Hari byinshi bituma tutakwihuta guhita tumanura, tukabanza tukabiha umwanya tukizera yuko ibyo tubona bizagenda uko tubyifuza. Uko tubyifuza ubwo nuko economy byifuza, ariko bigomba gufasha economy gukomeza kugira stability. Kuri subsidy nkuko nabivuze, iyo muri bikomoka kuri petrol yavuyeho burundu. So iyo ngiyo kandi babonye ko inflation ya ibikomoka kuri petrol yakomeje kuba hasi, so iyo yavuyemo. Iyigenanye na transport y'abantu, ntabwo turamenya uko leta izabikora. Icyo twasabye no kwenda bikorwa ntibibe icyarimwe kugira ngo byo kugira ingaruka nini ariko abantu bari no kuri iyi mibare tureba. So kugeza ubu rero muri ya 5% ntabwo twashoboye kwishyira kuko nabo barakiga ukuntu babikora neza bidahungabanyije abaturage ko n'ubundi bo bashaka kurengera. So ibyo rero ubwo tuzabigaragaza mu mibare nitumara kumenya gahunda uko zimeze.
Thank you, Governor. Akoze kuri icyo kibazo wabajije. Wenda icyambere umuntu yavuga nuko iyo perception y'uko iyo ufite banki nyinshi ariho serivisi ziba nziza ntabwo ari byo. Ahubwo no kureba imbaraga izo banki ziba zifite nuko ziha serivisi abazigana. So urebye kuri umubare wa banki dufite ubu ni 11 nashyizemo banki y'igihugu Development Bank ndetse na Cooperative Bank. Ikigaragara mu mibare nuko konti z'abakiriya ntizagabanutse kubera banki zagiye zishyira hamwe. Ikindi nuko iyo banki ebyiri zishyize hamwe zikagira ingufu zikaba zashobora no gutanga inguzanyo nyinshi kurushaho, nta kibi tubonamo ku isoko. Ikibi nuko haba banki nke cyane zikaba nkaho zikoze cartel cyangwa se kujya kuzumvikana ku biciro. Aho niho nkatwe nka banki nkuru y'u Rwanda ishinzwe kugenzura amabanki twabona ari ikibazo. Ibyo ntiturabibona. Icya kabiri ni ukureba ese inshingano zacu zo kurengera umuguzi ukoresha serivisi z'imari izo banki zihuje cyangwa se ziguzwe n'izindi, hari imbogamizi tubona kuko abantu babonaga serivisi. Urebye kuri banki zahujwe muri iyi myaka 2 ishize, yaba BPR na KCB, yaba Equity na Cogebank, icyo kibazo ntiturakibona. Ariko nagira ngo byumvikane neza ko kuba banki nguri indi ni ibintu bisanzwe no muri business. Hari amakampani ahura akaba manini. Ikibi nuko zagenda zigura izindi noneho ugasanga zabaye nke cyane ku buryo nta competition ihari hagati yazo cyangwa se zibangamira inyungu z'abakoresha serivisi z'imari. Ndumva ari cyo navuga kuri icyo kibazo. Kigarutire.
Murakoze, Governor. Vincent Gasana, KT Press. On remittances, I mean, they're obviously important for our economy. And we know that remittances to Africa are usually the income or cost than anywhere else. Is there something that we locally can do to ease how people send money, or are we completely in the hands of money transfers elsewhere and there's nothing that can be done? The other thing I would like to ask, if I may, we keep going on about currency fluctuations, and it grabs headlines. Everybody says, well, you know, if but actually, is this just a normal pace of things, and is there a band in which we can say, look, just calm down unless it goes beyond this, or then everything is normal, because you go up and down as things do. So we can just simply stop worrying about the fluctuations that come normally. Thank you.
Okay. Then on fluctuation, I also request Thierry to add something. But currency depreciation is not really like inflation as such. Currency depreciation is an indication of the value of your currency vis-a-vis international transactions and vis-a-vis your economic fundamentals. So the only challenge or worry would be if the movement of the price of the currency is influenced by artificial forces like speculation. But if it is linked to the demand and supply of the currency, is linked to the trade, international trade mainly, the one that impacts on your currency, there's no band that can be given that it is normal if it stays here. So normally what we would expect is to let the market forces, the economic fundamentals, determine the value of your currency, because that's how it can be competitive globally. So, for example, if you try to protect it against depreciation, you are favoring more imports to come to your country, and you are discouraging domestic production. But as the currency moves depending on the forces of production and the trade, then your currency is finding its own value. And like today, you wouldn't say because, let me use maybe Rwanda against the Ugandan shilling, because Rwanda is like 3 times the Ugandan shilling, you won't say it's better than the Ugandan shilling. It depends on the context of the economy, or even the Tanzanian currency. So it would only be a challenge if there are negative forces driving the depreciation of the currency. If anything, today, when you look at, let me continue using our neighbor. Years ago, it was like you would buy goods in Uganda, you come to sell it to Rwanda and still make profit, because the Rwandan currency was a bit hard. So, and Ugandan cement could come and was more competitive on our market than our cement. But as, let's say, the Rwandan currency is depreciating against the Ugandan currency, we are becoming more competitive against the Ugandan currency, and therefore our production here can compete against the Ugandan goods, and you won't see them really dominating and killing our industry. So I use this as just one example because they are our neighbors, they are the ones that we trade with closely. But it's and I've been saying this even before, depreciation is just that negative as people think. It's a way that your currency is finding its value, and therefore you are able to be competitive on the international market, to support exports and support domestic production for domestic use, and you are able to deal with imports. In the short run, it might be a problem because imports are getting expensive, so in the short run. But in the long run, it's beneficial for the growth of the economy. But Chief, you can add to that and then answer the next question.
Thank you, Governor. Adding to that, the exchange rate flexibility is also a tool to adjust against any shock. So it's a result, and it's also an adjustment. For example, last year, as it was presented, the trade deficits widened, and as a result, the currency depreciated more than usual. That was the adjustment that was done last year. This will help our own goods to be more competitive this year and next year, therefore reducing the trade deficit and normalizing the exchange rate depreciation gradually. So, in other words, it's not that of a problem if there is an adjustment at a point where there's a lot of pressure on the demand for forex, provided that this high depreciation does not stay too long. That would be now where the impact would be felt more on inflation and on imported costs. But as Governor said, rather do the adjustments when it is necessary and then stabilize or go back to a normal situation in terms of the trade deficit and a normal depreciation than try to hold to it. Because if you try to keep it constant, what will happen is the adjustment will be bigger and more harmful to the economy in a way. So that's what I can say, and we are looking at a medium term where gradually the situation normalizes and the pressures reduce on the trade deficit side. Luckily, as Governor also explained, it's not only the trade deficit, we also have other sources of inflows that are contributing positively to inflow of dollars in a way that the depreciation is not higher than it should be now. So, for example, we talked about tourism. These tourism revenues have been growing fast since COVID. This has helped actually the currency not to depreciate more, right? Another one that you mentioned is remittances. And remittance is a very good inflow. Today we are close to $500 million in remittances as of last year. It is very high, and it's been steadily increasing since even the period where we thought it would be reduced. So in the period of COVID, in the period of the war in Ukraine, in the period of high inflation in the countries where Rwandan diaspora send money, still there is an increase in remittances. Why? For various factors. Probably solidarity, supporting relatives here, but the cost also. As you mentioned, the cost is an important factor, and the cost is reduced. The cost to send money from outside the country has reduced significantly for the past few years, and it's becoming more convenient as people can receive money directly on their phone, on the mobile money, through mobile money transfers. So we think that as costs are reducing, this helps also remittances to increase, and our developing countries and African countries to increase their sources of inflows. That's a trend that we are seeing. Competition is happening against these operators, and cost reducing, which is a good factor. And this trend is continuing. Thank you.
Is there something, as I say, that we can do locally to make it more convenient for people to send money in? I mean, would it be, it's fanciful, for instance, to suggest that one can do things in such a way that, say, neighboring countries would find it more profitable and easier to send money through here and to go to other countries? Is that something that can be done locally? Or does one have to, or does the bank have to remain within whatever the money transfers organizer or companies are doing?
Thank you, Governor. I think probably going back to the flow of remittances and what Dr. Thierry explained, it's true that for African countries we still have higher costs. I think the average globally, there's a target of having 3%, and Africa is around between 4 and 6% of the amount you send that is taken as fee. But because of one, having more competition, these fintechs that are challenging the big two that usually were the main, I would say, remittance companies, that has reduced gradually the cost. Secondly, I think it's not about locally, I mean, the receiving end. If we have, of course, those companies that allow remittances to come into the country, and I think we have 3 of the fintechs that are actually unicorns in Africa that are now established here. So that is also has had a very good impact on, one, the volume of remittances that we receive, and secondly also the cost, because they bring more competition. So I think on Rwanda's side, the fact that we are facilitating the establishment of these fintechs in the country, and especially the payment service providers one, is bringing more competition, and hopefully we can see that our costs for remittances is going down. The second is also having this culture of adopting more digital financial services, where the population gets access to devices, or we've seen the increase in users of mobile money. So that's also something that I think domestically we have done and achieved, that allows more people to receive money through those digital channels, including money sent from abroad. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
Governor, with your permission, we can take one last question. CNBC.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Governor. Commendable numbers. My name is Abi Gina from CNBC Africa. My question is in regards to the economic outlook for the country. You did indicate that you're seeing the numbers being at about 6.2%. And have you also priced in the risk that the country will also be going for an election later in the year. Is this likely to impact spending power as well as tamper on any of the macroeconomic issues? My second question is in regards to the common currency for the region. If there's any update along those lines, how far are we as a region, and what's the input from BNR?
Thank you. So I hope I didn't confuse you. The 6.2 I said was the original projection for economic growth 2023. That was the projection we had. And based on the numbers we have for the first 3 quarters of 7.6 plus the frequent numbers we see for fourth quarter, we said we expect the economy to grow much higher than the 6.2. For 2024, we don't have a new projection yet. We have 6.8% projection for 2024. That was done last year. So we expect to revise the projection if need be in March. That's when we'll give a new, it's normally the Minister of Finance that does that. They'll give a new projection for the performance of the economy this year. But for last year, we expect it to be way above the 6.2 that was originally projected. So, but what we see now, and as we saw in the financial numbers, we expect still the economy to remain strong this year. So for now, we still take the 6.8, and we no intention to change that. If for reporting purposes, you can maintain the 6.8% projection for 2024. The other question on the on the currency, no updates for now. So we're still waiting for the Monetary Institute to be established that will coordinate the efforts towards the monetary single currency. So for now, nothing has changed.
Thank you, Governor. And that marks the end of our press conference. Rakoze.
Thank you. So thank you. Rakoze cyane mwese.